This is a review for Tale as Old as Time, The Art and Making of Beauty and the Beast by Charles Solomon. So this review is probably going to be longer than usual just because I have a lot to say about this book. Beauty and the Beast is my favorite animated film, and this book is really interesting in the world of animation books and has a really interesting history too, so I want to sort of touch on a lot of that stuff. And I have a lot of really positive things to say about it, but I worry that my love for the film may be kind of clouding my judgment of the book a little bit. And I really do value a large degree of objectivity when reviewing the books on this channel. So to that end, I would actually recommend that you go and check out some of the 2- and 3-star reviews for this book, because sometimes they're a little harsh, but I do actually think they make some really great points that I think might serve as quite a good balance to my review, which might be a little bit biased due to my love for the film. So the very first thing to acknowledge is the title, The Art and Making of. People get very prickly about this, and it's often the thing that 1-star reviews are made of if people don't feel like they're getting enough of one or the other. So right at the top, I want to say I really don't think you should be thinking of this as an art book, particularly compared to the Disney art books you may have been used to, because while there is a lot of art in here and it's a very visual book, it's not going to be the same quantity nor style of art you may be used to if you've read any of the other Disney Renaissance art of books or more modern art of books. There's a ton of imagery that actually has nothing directly to do with the film. There are a lot of screenshots, there are a lot of animation cells, things like that, things that are not really the concept art you might be expecting. It's very concept art light, I think you'll find. Which, you know, is the whole reason I do these look-throughs, is because you'll be able to get a really good idea of the text to concept art to sketches to other photography. You know, you'll get an idea of the ratio of all that stuff, and hopefully avoid some potentially major disappointment. Oh, isn't this amazing? It's my favorite part because you'll see stuff that a lot of other art books tend to neglect. That is the really early stages of development, which I think is so important for understanding the creation of a movie and understanding how it came to be. So here you can see things like these really... So you can see the style they were going for, even in the animation, was completely different from the final product. You can see a lot of this stuff on the Blu-ray as well, which is really interesting. But, you know, like, see, this is Gaston, and look how different he is. It's such a different style. And then this is Belle, and you can see even the style of animation, just so different, but just so wonderful to have actually included in a book, because, like I said, a lot of art and making of books neglect this stuff. And so because this book is very broad, I think the best way for you to get an idea of what's included is for me to just go through the table of contents. The origins of the original story. Disney on the rebound after the 1984 change in management. The initial version of the film. Kirk Wise and Gary Trousdale become directors of a new interpretation. Howard Ashman and Alan Menken make the film a musical. Creating the characters. Creating the world for the story, completing the film, and the death of Howard Ashman. Beauty and the Beast comes to the stage. Beauty and the Beast in IMAX and in 3D. Acknowledgements, bibliography, and index. And I'm not sure if some people will be slightly annoyed that this book doesn't just focus on the film, that there is a lot of material on things other than just the movie, but I actually really liked it. I loved the stuff on the origin and seeing the development of this as sort of a franchise in a way, because to me, I really think of this as a making of book, which I really love and is so exciting to me because most animated films only get a art of book, and so it's very rare to see a making of book for an animated film, so it's a real treat. And it's especially fantastic that it's for this movie. You know, Beauty and the Beast was the first animated film to be nominated for a Best Picture Oscar, and, you know, so as a animated film, it has such an important place in animation history, and so to be able to have a book that sort of chronicles the making of this movie and beyond, I think this is definitely the best movie they could have done this sort of book for. And what's interesting is at the start of the Disney Renaissance is when they started making these art books for every film. So neither The Little Mermaid nor Beauty and the Beast had any book, but then Aladdin had an art and making of book. It was very slender. It wasn't certainly the sort of neither art nor making of book that we're used to. And then Lion King, Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, blah blah blah, up to Tarzan and Mulan all received these sort of books in the same sort of format as this book, vertical rather than the horizontal ones we're used to. And then throughout the early 2000s, there was no real set format for whether a book was an art of book or a making of book. There was a lot of mix, and the format and style was very all over the place, until you get into more recent times with Princess and the Frog, Tangled, and the Pixar books, that sort of horizontal format that now is sort of like the standard for every animated film. So this book actually came out in 2010, which to me is kind of incredible, because the fact of the matter is, art and making of books are primarily created as promotional tools for the film, the same as t-shirts or posters or toys or novelizations, any of that stuff. It's really just part of the promotion of the film. It's only sort of classic films that will receive a real proper historical art and making of treatment in book form. Things like we've seen in recent years, Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Snow White, blah blah blah, those sort of classic films, or even for movies from the 60s, 70s, 80s that are now just starting to receive really good making of books, because they're being done by people who are not necessarily looking to promote the movie, not necessarily being rushed to promote a product, so the books are able to be given the time and attention they need. And so I'm just so surprised and delighted that, in 2010, out of nowhere, Don Hahn has just sort of come to Charles Solomon and said, make a art and making of Beauty and the Beast movie, when there was no need to promote this movie. The movie's certainly an instant Disney classic, but it wasn't even like, this book wasn't even being created as like to sort of promote like a 10-year anniversary thing or anything. And so I just think it really stands out in the history of art and making of books, that the book just sort of came out of nowhere for a film that we haven't had a proper book for. All of a sudden they release one. But having said that, interestingly, in 1991 there was kind of an art and making of book. There was a book called Disney's Art of Animation, From Mickey Mouse to Beauty and the Beast. That was by Bob Thomas, and that actually had a surprisingly robust section, I think about 90 pages, on the art and making of Beauty and the Beast, which was actually really, really good. I was very impressed by how Bob Thomas was able to compress a lot of really great Beauty and the Beast behind the scenes information into a book, which one could say, even from having Beauty and the Beast mentioned in the title, was designed to tie in with the film, but not necessarily a book that was just on Beauty and the Beast. And also what's kind of interesting is, even though Beauty and the Beast, the film, never received its own book when it came out, in the mid-90s, I believe there was a book for the Broadway musical, which I'd never actually gone through, so I'm not sure how much it details anything to do with the film. And so then eventually in 2010 we did get this book, and I don't know if Disney either didn't do a large print run or fans just sort of gobbled it up, because then only 2 or 3 years after the book was released they were basically gone. And I've never seen a book become so expensive so quickly in the second-hand market on places like eBay. Used copies were selling for about $150 up to new copies which were selling for $300. They were just so prohibitively expensive. And then I was so pleased by the publishing history of this book again when it was announced that, to coincide with the live-action Beauty and the Beast, they were going to be re-releasing and expanding this book, which is just such an amazing, phenomenal opportunity for fans, because any of you who collect art and making of books will know that these books almost never get a second edition, let alone a second printing. So to have an opportunity come up where fans who missed out on the first time are able to get this book again is really fantastic. So while I am reviewing the 2010 edition here, I have actually compared both books, going through page by page, not line by line, so some of the text, there might have been something changed in the text a little bit, but the new edition, the front part of the new edition on the animated film is exactly the same as this book, which is why I decided not to get it. I am not a fan at all of the live-action remakes that that Disney are making, and I haven't actually seen the live action Beauty and the Beast, but from the trailer and things, it just looks like something awful that I'm not interested in. Since there's nothing new in the new edition on the animated film, I didn't think I needed to get it. But even if you're like me and you don't like the live action versions but you still really love the animated versions, then definitely get that book while you can, because you're getting everything in this book. And then, you know, if you don't care about the extra stuff, then, you know, doesn't really hurt. And also, if you're like me and you just like the animated version and not the live action, then there's no reason to shell out for the new edition. There's nothing new in there for you. And then in terms of this new edition, there's also another group I want to address, which is the people who say, hey, I already have this book, I love the animated version, but I also really liked the live action version. Is getting the upgrade worth it? Depends how much you really like the live action version. And even though I don't like the live action version, and it is clear that they have just sort of tacked that on to this book in order to promote the movie without having to create a whole new book, I actually do think they did a pretty good job, and it's quite a robust addition to this book. So I definitely think you should seriously consider the upgrade if you like both versions. But it is just such a fantastic opportunity for fans who missed out on getting this book the first time. So the history of Beauty and the Beast, as detailed in this book, is actually quite broad. There's actually quite a lot of information up front discussing the fairy tale. If you've read any of the more recent Disney books, like the Cinderella one, Snow White, Sleeping Beauty, you'll notice a similar format where they're sort of taking a whole look at the evolution of the fairy tale into their movie and beyond. And so then the book also discusses other adaptations of the movies, you know, black and white adaptations, and then it discusses the making of this movie, and then goes on to discuss the Broadway musical, etc. There's actually a lot on the stage musical in this book, including costume sketches and things like that. So it really does detail this story beyond just the animated movie, perhaps a little more than some people might like. As for the making of information that's included on the actual film, I found it really, really great. I really loved, because it's such, like I said at the start, a really unique experience to be able to get a making of book for a movie. One sort of caveat to that was, then last night I was watching the Blu-ray special features for Beauty and the Beast, and actually noticed quite a lot of overlap in both the information and imagery in both this book and that. So I can definitely sympathize with people who would then accuse this book of having sort of redundant information and not necessary if you have the DVD and Blu-ray. But I know for me personally, as a big fan of this movie, I still do think there is enough really great unique stuff in this book to warrant the purchase and time to make it still feel really valuable and special to fans. Probably my most major criticism of this book, even as a fan, is the actual paper quality of this book is really crappy. It's very thin, very magazine-y, so I'm not actually sure, but hopefully they've improved the production qualities for the updated edition. Another interesting thing is that even if you're not necessarily the biggest fan of Beauty and the Beast, I think there's actually a lot of really great stuff in here for fans of just Disney in general and animation. There's a lot of imagery and text that relates to those areas rather than just focusing solely on Beauty and the Beast. So it's not necessarily strictly just for fans of the film, animation fans in general, Disney fans in general. I think there's still a lot to still be able to get quite a kick out of this book. So on the whole, objectively speaking, is this a really amazing art and making of book? Probably not. It is pretty good, but it's certainly not one of the all-time greats. However, subjectively, as a fan of this book, I think it is just a wonderful, wonderful book.